What are your feelings about cloud infrastructure? Bam, throw that and see what they say. And you'll get a sense of whether they're talking from the heart and how they experience the tool and the solution, or from the logical side and how it either drills down to efficiency or money savings, etc.
Welcome back to Neuroconversant Leadership, where we talk about effective leadership and communication, especially in the STEM workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I love to help great engineers become great leaders. Today, we have a special guest with us, Lisa Panarello. Lisa, welcome.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm very happy to have you here. Can you do us all a favor and explain a little bit about what you do in your day job?
Sure. Quickly, I can say I help people get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So as a growth coach and a success coach, I help leaders, aspiring leaders, anyone in their field get to where they want to go and be the best that they want to be in their field. And I also do that as keynote speaker and MC when I'm at events and having a larger audience impact and helping folks get out of their seat, in their mind, and sort of changing their mindset for their own growth.
I love it. I often have said that one of my superpowers is that I'm afraid of just about everything. So I've just gotten used to being afraid and dealing with it and overcoming it.
There you go. Yeah. And it was that whole expression on the other side of fear is greatness. I just did a keynote in Australia regarding, my topic was uncomfortable courage, and how the moments that you feel uncomfortable, you're about to step into something great. When you're sensing that sort of fear, and so I walk them through, there's a lot of things around imposter syndrome where you can get that too, and walking through some process of how to go from uncomfortable to comfortable, because it's going to happen again. So why not have a process for moving through those pain points and recognizing the skill set that you can have, and the journey that you have on the other side of it is where you're just being your best and growing every day.
I love it. And this isn't exactly the topic that I was planning on talking about today, but can you share one or two tips for helping people get through discomfort and just plunging in?
Sure, I appreciate it, and I want to certainly get to your topic. We diverted, but it's just something that's really been very, very weighing on a lot of people's minds. As a matter of fact, almost every person I spoke to after I said I was going to do this talk on uncomfortable courage, friend, family member, stranger, whatever we're talking about, somehow it came up about imposter syndrome. I fear someone's going to judge me. I fear I'm not going to be as good as I should be, and comparing myself and all that. So sort of the first thing, Jeremy, that I would share with everyone is to take a deep breath and welcome that feeling. Just having a positive relationship with the anxiety that you might have about not feeling worthy or not feeling good enough. Say, this is going to knock on my door tomorrow and the next day. So let's not just sort of push it aside and plow through it, because then you forget how you plow through it. So the first thing I think is to have a positive relationship with and say, this is a good thing, this feeling. And then next step is, all right, well, what am I feeling? What am I afraid of? What's the fear? Let me define it. Who's really knocking on my door right now? And that can help you then figure out, well, how do I approach it? It's just like taking your car to a shop for mechanics to look at it. You don't just give them the car and then they fix everything, but they not really fix the problem. So it's like, what is the problem? What is the knocking? Where is it coming from? And then you can figure out, okay, maybe I'm comparing myself and I shouldn't do that. Maybe I have more experience than I think I have. Let me analyze myself. And so that's the two steps. Welcome it, and then figuring out what is it that, sort of define that fear.
And the welcoming, it makes sense, because I think if you don't question your ability to do a thing, it means you're not stretching and not getting to your full potential. You're just kind of being stagnant.
Yeah, I kind of use the range. There's humble, which is wonderful, to say I have more to learn. That's great. And then the flow on the other side is arrogance. I can do wrong. I'm always going to win. And then everything in between is courage. So the farther you are towards being confident, that's comfortable courage. And those are good things. Who wants to be afraid every day about everything? And I know you're saying, I had this epiphany that I'm afraid of everything, but you then petered it out. And you kind of singled each one out to go through it. And the other side is uncomfortable courage. So you can use that in order to gravitate towards being comfortable with something and getting over those humps.
It's almost like the circle of what you are affected by and what you can control. The more time you spend focusing on the small circle of what you can control, the bigger it gets. And the more time you spend focusing outside of that circle, the smaller your circle of control
Right.
gets. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the same thing with embracing your fears. The more time you spend in them, the more things you get comfortable with.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. How about we talk about what we planned on talking about?
Let's get to it. Yeah.
One thing that's been weighing on my mind lately is how do people take complex ideas and explain them well?
Mm.
I think that I'm pretty good at it and I've been good at it for a long time, but I'm not 100% sure why I'm good at it. And so I've been analyzing the steps and I'm really interested in how often you see it in the people you work with. Do they struggle to explain complex ideas to other people and how you help them achieve that?
I do see it a lot. It will depend on what field they're in and what level they're in, but I do see it a lot. I think it stems from, wow, going back to the fear and the self-doubt is, do I have to give everything away for this person to really understand me? Do I have to say everything that's on my mind right now and get it all out? Um, so a lot of times in coaching, I'll ask folks to share something that's just on their mind. Doesn't have to be a sales pitch. And they're like, "Well, I'm not sure." And they kinda second guess, and then they waffle, and then I kinda prod and try to pull it out of them. So I think we get in our brain. We really get stuck in our mind, Jeremy, before we start to spew out any complex ideas, and if we're stuck in here, whatever comes out will be what we just said yesterday, and we're not sure if it works, but we're just gonna say it because 'cause we're comfortable with it. Or this is what we think this person needs to hear, so we say it all, no matter how it's coming out. So I really think it starts from us just being stuck in our head.
And I always think that it's better to be stuck in the other person's head. So when you're talking to them, what do they care about
Yeah.
and what do they need to know? You may have 10,000 things that you could share, but what are the two or three things that they need to know?
I agree. I think the first step in sharing a complex idea, whether it's for sales, whether it's for marketing, finance, and it could be in the office to your fellow peers or your C-suite. It could be to a client. It could be to a larger audience. With a larger audience, even this you can do with a larger audience because I do too. I do sort of temperature reading. So whether it's a one-on-one or small group or a large group, it really can help to understand them first, asking questions. So, like, how familiar are you with whatever, a topic, a product, a technology, because you can kinda get a baseline, and then ask a few more questions. So before you start to provide all your knowledge, let's get a sense of what they know already, what they've been doing with it already. What's most important to you when you're evaluating a solution like this? Or have you used something similar to this before? Yeah. I actually, I have a lot of clients that in coaching, they'll come to me and struggling with, say, a job search. Now, I could go right into the algorithms of LinkedIn and optimizing your self-marketing tools and the applicant tracking systems and, crafting a value proposition. All these heavy, great, interesting terms, but I don't know where they are yet. So instead I ask them, "So what digital tools are you using now and how? What are you sharing about yourself online and your networking conversations?" Because the answers they give me, the language that they use and the temperament in which they share it gives me an understanding of where they are and what they know. And then I have a better sense of, okay, well, let me share something that is more relevant to you.
One thing that I think can be a struggle is if you're presenting an idea, especially to a group, and you ask, does that make sense? And you just ask it that way,
Yeah.
almost everyone's going to say yes, whether they do or not. Do you have any techniques for getting them to actually answer whether they're following along or struggling?
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective because I agree with you. Does that make sense? First of all, it's a yes or no question. And getting a head nod or even a yes is not true understanding. Someone may fear saying, "No, that doesn't make sense," because then they'll feel less than. I know I've been there. "Oh, if I say no, I must be stupid." So I would ask more open-ended questions. So for instance, how does that make sense for you? What are you stuck on when you hear that? From what I just shared, how would you explain that back to me? Based on what I just shared, what can you do with that? So it's really more open-ended questions to get them to kind of, it also actually encourages conversation in that moment to get them to share what their understanding is.
It's interesting because when you're talking about business plans and you ask someone, "Do you have a plan?" They say, "Yep, I have a whole plan." I said, "Have you written it down?" They're like, "No." I'm like, "Well, then recite it back to me." And if they haven't taken the time to write it down, they don't really have it. And if they can't turn around and explain the complex idea back to you,
Yeah.
they may think they have it, but if they can't explain it, they probably don't. So when you are explaining something, how do you go about figuring out what the other person needs to know? Whether it's one on one and you can just kind of talk it through. But if you're presenting or like selling a product, you don't have as much leeway to ask those questions ahead of time. So what would you do there?
Well, if you don't have the leeway to ask those questions ahead of time, and that'll happen a lot in sales because it could be an impromptu conversation that you're having. Maybe you're at a trade show, or you kind of stumble onto someone where you overhear a conversation. Oh, this is a possible prospect. If you go right into your pitch, your sales, your solution, first of all, it's an uncomfortable moment for them because they're like, well, hold up, you don't even know me yet. How do you start selling, right? So I would say you take that moment to ask them, what have you been looking for? Kind of, it would depend on the product or the solution that you're looking to kind of market or sell. But I'd take that moment to say, hey, what do you know about this tool already? What's happening in your world, whether it be at work or home? What problems are you experiencing with, let's say it's a refrigerator. So how do you like your current refrigerator? What would you like to see differently? Any challenge that you've been experiencing over the past couple of years? Simple questions like that can get you to know that individual and what their pain points are before you go right into whatever your complex idea is.
When I first started in corporate America, was in an IT related company. And one thing that they would do to teach you that was they would hold up a pen and he would say, "Sell me this pen." And what everybody in the beginning would do is talk about how great the pen writes or whatever. And then he's like, "I don't need it to do that." And eventually you realize the question is, what do you think you need a pen for?
It's so
Uh,
funny you give me that analogy because, uh, all right, we're going back over 30 years ago when I went for my first advertising job interview. And the woman said, I mean, she was brutal. She just said, "Sell me this stapler." And she put it right in front of me. And I'm like, humming, humming, humming. I mean, stapler, right? And I didn't, and she wanted something within a split second. Now, of course, when I leave there and I think about it, oh, I could have said this and that. But everything I thought of afterwards was still my idea of why this works. Now, granted, I know in a stapler ad, you've got to have, your 30-second rule, your 8-second rule. But I could have said, well, why do you need a stapler? Why do you think you need a stapler? Do you have a stapler already? How is it not working? Things like that. To just because I think if we go right into our explanation, complex or not, we're assuming we know what this person needs and what they want and what their pain points are, and you lose them right off the bat. Also, if you start explaining, you could be over explaining or under explaining. So again, that temperature reading of, well, when's the last time you used a stapler and when did it not work for you? We're using arbitrary terms here. Even finance, how like what investments are you already familiar with? Without If you're going to go right into explaining mutual funds and stocks and bonds, you could be over explaining to someone who's never used investments before. I'm sorry, over explaining to someone who already thinks they knows everything, or under explaining to someone who's fearful of it. So I think you've got to get a temperature reading of your audience before you can start selling.
And when it's not selling, I end up working with a lot of engineers, and engineers are famous for wanting to tell you everything. They they want to show you that they know everything, which is what they're trained to do.
Yeah.
But when they're dealing with executives, they very often will over explain why they need a thing, and the executive says, "Just tell me what you need."
Yeah.
So I will always say, start with a little. Start with what you need and keep the details in your back pocket until they're asked for.
Yeah, that whole phrase "less is more" can get annoying, but in this case, in this perspective that we're talking about, I think that you're dead on because investors, the executives, even a general customer, they very really need every technical or financial detail, especially right away. They need what they want. So if you're going to start selling, if you're gonna go right into it, let's say you don't have a moment to ask questions, then I would go right into what problem are you solving and who cares about it? This way you can have some sort of hook.
Are you familiar with the Myers-Briggs?
I am.
One of them is detailed versus big picture.
Mhm.
And I'm very much a big picture person.
Yeah.
So if someone starts talking with a lot of detail to me, I will absolutely zone out.
So now. And I now use a lot, I use DISC, which has been very popular the last 10 years, and that's assessment behavioral communication.
Mhm.
And that has to do with how we solve problems, how we interact with people, how we deal with the pace of the environment, and then how we deal with rules and procedures. So the DISC, dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. You've got folks who are on the compliance side. I'll give you a perfect example. My husband and I are completely opposite in terms of our personality and our communication styles. He is this high C, high S, loves details. He'll get right into all of research to the hilt. Where I'm the high I, I'm like, and a high D, I'm like, let's get to. I love interaction and people, but I don't want as much detail. And I'm more of a feelings person, and I want to get to the point. So we can kind of butt heads. So if you're looking at it from a person who's looking to sell a complex idea or explain a complex idea, is really understanding, well, how does your audience listen and process? So now when I go to my husband in this case, I'm using an example, and I want to, whether it's we're planning vacation, whether we're looking to, right now we're working on a remodeling of our den, right? I can't come right at him with, hey, all these wonderful ideas because I'm excited. I'm an optimist. I have to build a little business case around it. So I do a little research first, bring some numbers to the table, and vice versa. If he's going to come out with me all these details, I'm like, I just want to know what the end game is going to be. So we have to shift our communication style in order to not lose ourselves, but to allow our idea to sink in for the other person.
That's fascinating. And that's someone that you know well because you're married.
Yeah.
When there are so many variables in the way people listen, if it's, you're pitching an idea, let's say you're at a startup and you're pitching an idea to venture capitalists,
Yeah.
you have to understand how they listen. So big picture versus detail is one, but you also mentioned feelings. So logic versus emotion is another one.
Mm,
If you are addressing an emotional person with strictly logic, it's going to kind of pass and vice versa.
yeah.
Are there things you do in conversations to get a quick feel for where someone is on that spectrum?
Yeah, that's interesting because that's right in the moment. You're right. I know my husband very well, but I didn't. It took me a while to really, even though we knew each other when we got married, but it takes a while to really understand. And it's also on me to have the desire to understand, not just get mad. Why aren't you listening to me? Why aren't you coming over to my side? Well, am I explaining in a way that's going to influence you? And he needs logic where someone else may need the feelings. So, one thing you can actually just ask a question. What are your feelings about X? And how they answer that question could determine whether they're bringing feelings into the picture or logic into the picture. And usually feelings is a touchy word, but I'm not gonna use, "What's your emotional state on that?" Sounds weird. So
Yeah.
just, what are your feelings about cloud infrastructure? Bam, throw that and see what they say, and you'll get a sense of whether they're talking from the heart and how they experience the tool and the solution, or from the logical side and how it either drills down to efficiency or, money savings, etcetera. And then you'll have a sense of, and you might have, if especially to have 2 people, ask both of them or 3 people, if you can't have them write it down, if if they could, but if they're open to speaking it, get each person in the room, at least a consensus of, several folks in the room to share. Now you get a temperature reading of, you may have to address both because you may not have just feelers in the room, may not just have logic in the room. And from there, I like to speak to those people directly. All right, so for you, here's my thought on that. So if this person tunes out, I'm okay with that because they're not going to hear it anyway. For you, I would explain this. And I think you have that leeway to do that in a small group conversation.
I'll tell you another superpower of mine. My superpowers all come from my weaknesses, which is pretty interesting.
That's great.
Is growing up, people really made very little sense to me
Mm,
because they would say things that weren't what they actually meant. And
right.
everyone else seemed to have a code book, and I never did. So I got comfortable really paying attention and just admitting when something didn't make sense to me. and asking. And
Yeah.
so many people will not stop and ask.
So many people won't, and myself included for a long time because of listen, our emotional makeup comes from growing up, being young. So asking questions when I was younger was uncomfortable because how I was, what was the person who responded back to me. So I got very confused. So I don't feel confident when I'm asking certain questions. And then there are some times where hand up, wait a minute. So I've learned to go through that pain point and being more comfortable with asking questions. So it does take a little bit of savviness to get folks out of their skin to help them ask questions, and that is one of my superpowers. I love that you're calling that, let's own up to it, is getting people in the room comfortable with asking a question and explaining what they don't know. Because I'll be very upfront about how I feel about asking questions and what I don't know. So I'll probe and prod and I'll change how I ask questions. And I remember a college professor, all of us in the room, he would ask us a question. Crickets. Nobody, no student in the room answered, said anything. He asked it again. Crickets. Jeremy, he must have asked the same question the same way 5 times. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you expecting to happen differently?
Right.
So, what I'll look to do if I have silence for more than 30 seconds, and we're talking about a larger group, you got to give them a little time, by the way, let them process what kind of question they want to ask because it may not be off the top of mind. So I give them a good 30 seconds for thinking, and then I'll throw out, I'd rephrase the question. Or I might give them an example that helps them come up with a question. So I'll take what I shared and say, well, let me give you an example on this or an analogy. I'll give them an analogy, which, by the way, is really helpful when explaining complex concepts. So I'll give them an analogy and say, what do you think about that? And that sometimes will drum up some conversation and pull them more out to ask questions.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll say, what a lot of people ask is whatever. And then it's probably a question that they had
Yeah.
because enough people ask it, but it also gets the ball rolling.
Yeah. It's so ironic, the keynote that I recently did on Uncomfortable Courage, I opened up the keynote with, do you remember when you were a kid and you're in, say, I don't know, 4th, 5th grade, and teacher says, "Do you have any questions?" And you wanna raise your hand, but you don't because, oh, everyone's gonna think that's a stupid question. And you don't, and the student next to you raises their hand, asks the same question, and the teacher says, "That's a great question, Jeremy," and all. I'm like, "Well, that was my question." That happens again in high school and in college. And then when's the last time that you didn't raise your hand? How about yesterday in a meeting? And while it may not be a big deal, I think there is a loss in that. I think there's a loss of first getting an answer that you're looking for. There's a loss and opportunity for you to learn and for you to share your own ideas. So I get people comfortable with asking uncomfortable questions.
That's fantastic. I worked at Morgan Stanley for a while. And when I was brand new, vendors would come and they were talking about annuities, and annuities are complex. And there were 30 of us in the room, and I was the newest. And he kept saying things that made no sense to me. And I eventually leaned over to the guy next to me who had been a financial advisor for like 25 years. I said, "What does that mean?" He's like, "I don't know." So then I
Wow.
raised my hand and I asked the question, and everyone in the room was like, "Oh, thank God someone asked it."
Yeah. Yeah, because there's more people than you think have that same burning question. It takes a little bit of that uncomfortable courage to go ask it, for
Yeah.
sure. So that's the other side we're talking about. I know we're talking about how to explain a complex idea. It also is little onus is on the individual to ask the question when they're not fully understanding.
It reminds me of something someone told me a long time ago. He said that people think marriage is a 50-50 proposition. He said, but it's not. It's 100-100, because sometimes the other person has nothing to give and sometimes you have nothing to give and one person needs to carry it.
Yeah.
I feel that same way about communication. I think everyone should view it as 100% their responsibility to
Yeah.
make the communication go well, because sometimes the other person's just in their head and won't be able to adjust.
Yeah. And they could be in their head. I really agree with that. They can be in their head for good reason. Doesn't mean that they don't care about the person listening. They could just be so excited, so passionate, really, having to get this sale on the books or having to person to walk away and buying just their concept. So it could have some good intention. But when we're stuck in our head, we do need the other side sometimes to own up to, hey, I'm not getting it. And what I'll do is I can especially if you're talking about heavy concepts like you're saying, AI, investments, cloud storage, and these are all way above my pay grade. So if I'm speaking on a topic that may be considered complex, I may start off with, hopefully, I'll ask in a few questions. I still think that's the best way to do. I may give that caveat and say, listen, we're about to talk about a heavy topic. This stuff runs deep. There's a lot of connecting the dots. So I'm going to start big and drill down. I need you to shut me up, to throw out a question when something's just going awry, whether I'm not explaining a way you're getting it, or if I'm going too deep and you want me to go, peel back the layer less, so you want to go back 3 pages ago, I need you to let me know. So I'll give them that permission. This is what I'm talking about, a larger group.
Yeah, you're setting the ground rules for the conversation.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Lisa, this has been great, but unfortunately, we need to start wrapping up.
Yeah.
So what is a good way for people to learn more about you and or reach out?
Oh, appreciate the question. This has been a great call. So you can learn about me through careersadvance.org and LinkedIn. I'm heavily on LinkedIn, so you'll see my posts there. Instagram, where I'm putting up my vlogs. They can check out, I do biweekly vlogs on a variety of success topics and help people get past these uncomfortable zones. So careersadvance.org, lisa.careersadvance on Instagram, and then Lisa Careers Advance on LinkedIn. They could just do Lisa Careers Advance. They'll find me there.
Perfect. I'll put a link in the show notes. And then as we wrap up, is there one piece of communication advice you think everyone can benefit from?
There's a quote that I often end with, George Bernard Shaw. The worst thing about communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So I think we should just assume we are not speaking clearly and that someone is not getting it, because it forces us to come at it from different angles and be really curious about someone else's understanding.
I love that. And that especially pertains to explaining complex things. Assume they don't understand what you just said,
Yeah.
and then make sure that they do.
Yeah.
Perfect. Lisa, this has been great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you all.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Neuroconversant Leadership. We're over 100 episodes now. And as mentioned, I'm going to be making some changes. So I would love your feedback on what changes I should make, what things I should add, what things I should take away. Please do me a favor and reach out either on LinkedIn or on my email address, which is jdoran@neuroconversantleadership.com. I look forward to hearing your suggestions. Thanks a lot. Until next time, have a great week.